When Marcus Washington walked into Pinnacle Partners to finalize his billion-dollar acquisition, he was just another black man being told to get lost by the receptionist. But minutes later, when she realized he was about to become her boss, it was already too late to save the company from its own toxic culture. Marcus Washington adjusted his designer watch as he strode confidently through the revolving doors of the Pinnacle Partners building. At 45, the black CEO had built his tech company, Washington Innovations, from the ground up over 20 years, transforming a garage startup into a billion-dollar enterprise. Today's meeting would finalize his acquisition of Pinnacle Partners, a struggling but promising software firm that would complement his portfolio perfectly. He straightened his tailored navy suit jacket and approached the reception desk with the quiet assurance of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. Karen Miller sat behind the sleek reception desk, her eyes fixed on her computer screen. At 38, she'd worked at Pinnacle for over a decade, developing an almost territorial attitude about who deserved access to the executive floor. She didn't bother looking up as Marcus approached, her fingers continuing to tap at her keyboard. "Good morning. I'm here to see Richard Coleman," Marcus said pleasantly, his deep voice carrying the polished tone of countless business negotiations. Karen finally glanced up, her eyes scanning him from head to toe with obvious skepticism before returning to her screen. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her tone already suggesting she doubted it. The lobby bustled around them with the morning rush of employees, some casting curious glances at the exchange. "Yes, I'm Marcus Washington. We're scheduled for 9:30, he replied, maintaining his professional demeanor despite her coldness. Karen scrolled through her computer with exaggerated movements, her mouth forming a thin line. "I don't see any Marcus Washington here. Mr. Coleman is in meetings all day with important clients," she stated flatly, emphasizing the word important while giving him another once-over. Marcus took a measured breath. There must be some mistake. "The meeting was confirmed yesterday. I'm here to discuss the acquisition." He reached into his jacket pocket for his phone to show the confirmation email. Karen let out a derisive snort. "Acquisition? Look, I don't know what you're selling, but Mr. Coleman doesn't take unscheduled meetings. Why don't you get lost and stop wasting my time?" Her voice carried enough for nearby employees to hear, some showing visible discomfort while others exchanged glances. Marcus stood perfectly still, his expression unchanging despite the insult. 20 years of navigating corporate America as a black man had prepared him for moments like this. He simply took out his business card, embossed with the Washington Innovations logo and his title as CEO, and placed it on her desk. "I suggest you call Mr. Coleman immediately," he said quietly. "Your company has been in acquisition negotiations with mine for the past 3 months. I'm not here to sell anything. I'm here to buy your entire company." Karen's face paled as she finally looked at the business card. Recognition dawned in her eyes as she made the connection between the name and the recent company-wide rumors about a potential buyout. Without another word, she frantically picked up the phone and dialed an extension, her hands visibly shaking. "Mr. Coleman? I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a Marcus Washington here to see you," she stammered, her voice suddenly honey-sweet. "Yes, from Washington Innovations. Yes, sir, right away." Within seconds, Richard Coleman himself came bursting through the executive elevator doors. At 57, the CEO of Pinnacle Partners looked disheveled and panicked, his face flushed as he rushed toward Marcus with an outstretched hand. "Marcus, my God, I'm so sorry about this misunderstanding. We've been expecting you upstairs in the conference room," Richard said, shooting a furious glance at Karen, who seemed to shrink in her chair. "Please come up immediately. The entire board is waiting." Marcus nodded calmly but didn't move. "Before we proceed, Richard, I think we need to discuss what just happened." His voice remained measured, but there was steel behind his words. "Your receptionist just told me to get lost when I identified myself and stated my business." Richard's face went from red to ashen. "I can't even begin to apologize enough." "Karen is new," he began, but Marcus cut him off with a raised hand. "Karen just mentioned she doesn't see my name in the system despite our meeting being confirmed yesterday. And judging by the family photos on her desk that show at least 10 years of Christmas portraits, I doubt she's new," Marcus observed quietly. What concerns me is what this interaction suggests about your company culture. Marcus Washington sat at the head of the conference table in Pinnacle Partners' executive boardroom, an ironic position considering he was still technically a visitor. The room exuded corporate power. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a sprawling city view, while custom mahogany furniture and subtle indirect lighting created an atmosphere designed to impress clients and intimidate competitors. Framed awards and magazine covers featuring Richard Coleman lined the walls, telling the story of Pinnacle's rise in the tech industry. Yet today, the room's impressive design couldn't mask the palpable tension hanging in the air. Around the long oval table sat 12 people, Pinnacle's board members and top executives, all exhibiting varying degrees of anxiety. Richard Coleman occupied the chair directly to Marcus's right, a position that symbolized his demotion from head of the table within a mere 30 minutes. Richard's usually confident demeanor had crumbled. His tie was loosened, and a light sheen of perspiration covered his forehead despite the room's perfect climate control. He had practically begged Marcus to at least join the meeting before making any decisions based on the lobby incident, a plea Marcus had granted more out of professional courtesy than forgiveness. The executives had been mid-presentation when Marcus entered the room. Slides showing optimistic projections for the post-acquisition growth still glowed on the large screen at the far end of the room. Someone had hastily placed a Washington Innovations logo on the presentation's title slide, a transparent attempt to personalize what was clearly a generic deck. Coffee and pastries that no one was touching sat in the center of the table, the ceramic cups occasionally clinking as nervous hands reached for water instead. As I was explaining, Marcus continued, his voice calm but penetrating the silence with unmistakable authority. Company culture isn't just what's written in your mission statement or displayed on posters in your break room. It's reflected in how every employee treats every person who walks through your doors, from the janitor to the CEO. He maintained perfect eye contact as he spoke, his gaze moving deliberately from person to person around the table. Samantha Davis, Pinnacle's chief marketing officer, cleared her throat nervously. At 42, she was one of 3 women in the room and the only female executive. Mr. Washington, I completely understand your concern. What happened downstairs was unacceptable, but I hope you'll consider that one employee's actions don't represent our company values. Marcus nodded slightly, acknowledging her comment without agreeing with it. Ms. Davis, in my 20 years building Washington Innovations, I've learned that individual actions absolutely do reflect company values, especially from customer-facing staff who serve as the first point of contact with the outside world. People perform according to what they believe is acceptable in their environment. Jeffrey Wong, the chief financial officer, leaned forward with obvious anxiety. He had the most to lose from a failed acquisition. Pinnacle's financial troubles had been his primary headache for the past 18 months. We can implement immediate training for front desk staff. This is a fixable problem, Mr. Washington. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances as Marcus calmly reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sleek tablet. The room fell completely silent as he opened a document and adjusted his reading glasses. When he looked up, his expression remained impassive, but his eyes had hardened perceptibly. Your company has had 7 discrimination complaints filed against it in the past 3 years, Marcus stated, laying the tablet flat on the table where the screen displayed a neatly organized spreadsheet. 2 for racial discrimination in hiring practices, 3 for gender-based promotion disparities, 1 for age discrimination, and 1 for disability accommodation refusal. I had my team investigate these instances as part of our standard due diligence, but I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt. After all, complaints happen even in well-run organizations. Richard wiped sweat from his brow with a monogrammed handkerchief. Those complaints were all dismissed, he began, his voice carrying a defensive edge that undermined his attempt at confidence. They were settled, Marcus corrected him crisply. There's a difference. None reached litigation because Pinnacle paid to make them go away. According to the sealed settlements my legal team was able to review during our due diligence process. He swiped to another document on his tablet. You've spent $2.3 million on discrimination-related settlements, while investing less than $50,000 in diversity initiatives during the same period. That's not solving a problem. That's hiding it. The disclosure sent ripples of discomfort around the table. Some board members stared at their folded hands, while others shot accusatory glances at Richard. It was clear from their reactions that not everyone had been fully informed about these settlements. Elizabeth Chen, one of the more senior board members representing a major investor, spoke up for the first time. Mr. Washington, I can assure you that the board was not aware of the extent of these issues. We were informed that these were nuisance claims with no merit. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. That's a governance problem, Ms. Chen. A board that isn't asking the right questions about company culture is failing in its oversight duties. His tone wasn't accusatory, but matter of fact, which somehow made the criticism even more devastating. And now, I've experienced firsthand how visitors who don't fit a certain profile are treated here. He closed his tablet case with a decisive click that echoed in the silent room. Our offer to acquire Pinnacle Partners is withdrawn, effective immediately. The room erupted in panic responses. The chief strategy officer knocked over his water glass. Two board members began talking simultaneously, their voices rising above each other. Richard Coleman's face drained of color as he realized the implications of what was happening. Pinnacle had been banking on this acquisition to save them from their increasingly precarious financial position, a fact that everyone in the room knew all too well. Marcus pleads, Richard pleaded, abandoning formality as his voice cracked with desperation. That was one employee's terrible mistake. You can't judge our entire company based on one employee who felt comfortable enough in your environment to behave that way. Marcus interrupted, his voice never rising, but somehow cutting through the chaos. And who's apparently been here for years, not the new hire you initially claimed she was. That speaks volumes about what's tolerated here day to day. He stood up, buttoning his jacket with deliberate movements. Washington Innovations looks for partners with compatible values. Cultural compatibility is as important to us as technological synergy or financial metrics. Victor Ramirez, Pinnacle's head of product development and one of the few executives of color in the room, had been sitting silently throughout the exchange. Now he spoke up, his expression torn between professional loyalty and personal understanding. Mr. Washington, would you consider giving us the opportunity to address these issues before making a final decision? We have some excellent products in our pipeline that would integrate perfectly with your ecosystem. Marcus regarded him thoughtfully. Mr. Ramirez, I don't doubt the quality of your technical work. In fact, our due diligence confirmed that Pinnacle's engineering team is exceptional. But integrating companies isn't just about technology, it's about people. And right now, I'm not confident that your company culture would successfully merge with ours without causing significant damage to what we've built. David Harrison, the eldest board member and a venture capitalist who had funded Pinnacle's early rounds, cleared his throat. At 72, he had seen countless deals and understood the gravity of the situation. Son, I understand you're upset, but business is business. This is a $60 million deal that benefits both companies. Don't let one unpleasant interaction derail what makes financial sense. Marcus turned to him with a steady gaze. Mr. Harrison, with all due respect, I built Washington Innovations from my garage 20 years ago into a company valued at over $2 billion today. I didn't do that by making business decisions based on emotion. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. This is a business decision. Companies that tolerate discrimination face higher turnover, lower productivity, more litigation, and damaged reputations. The financial risk of merging with a company that has these underlying issues far outweighs any short-term technological gains. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus collected his materials and slid them into his briefcase, while the room remained frozen in collective shock. As he stood to leave, he addressed the group one final time. I should thank you, actually, he said, his tone softening slightly. You've saved me from making a costly mistake. Washington Innovations will be moving in a different direction. He placed a business card on the table. My HR director's contact information is on the back. When your engineers and developers start looking for new positions, which I suspect may be soon, tell them to mention this meeting. We're always looking for talented people who deserve a better workplace. With that, Marcus walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. Just before exiting, He turned back to face Richard Coleman, who remained stunned in his chair. For what it's worth, Richard, I hope this serves as a wake-up call. Companies can change their culture, but only when leadership acknowledges there's a problem. Today could be the most expensive lesson you've ever received, or the most valuable. That choice is yours now. The door closed behind Marcus with a soft click that somehow sounded like the final nail in Pinnacle Partners' coffin. In the boardroom, chaos erupted as the implications of what had just occurred began to sink in. Their financial lifeline had just walked out the door, and with it, possibly the future of their company. All because of a culture they had allowed to fester beneath the surface of their polished corporate image. By that afternoon, news of Washington Innovations pulling out of the Pinnacle Partners deal had spread through the business community like wildfire. What had begun as whispers among industry insiders quickly erupted into headline news across financial networks and business publications. The story gained particular traction because of its unusual nature. Major acquisitions rarely fell apart at the final stage, and when they did, it was typically over financial discrepancies or regulatory hurdles, not because of a receptionist's behavior. Within hours, Pinnacle's stock had plummeted 40% as investors lost confidence that the struggling company could survive without the lifeline the acquisition would have provided. Inside Pinnacle's headquarters, the atmosphere had transformed from one of anticipation to one of crisis. The executive floor, normally a controlled environment of hushed conversations and strategic planning, now buzzed with frantic energy. Conference rooms that had been prepared for post-merger celebrations were hastily converted into emergency strategy sessions. Employees gathered in small groups near coffee stations and in hallways, their hushed conversations punctuated by worried glances. Most had heard fragments of what had happened, that somehow, the Washington Innovations deal had collapsed because of something that occurred in the lobby, but few knew the full story. Karen Miller had been escorted from the building by security within an hour of Marcus Washington's departure, her personal items hastily packed into a cardboard box. As she walked through the lobby one final time, her colleagues averted their eyes, some from embarrassment, others from anger at what her actions had potentially cost the company. The irony wasn't lost on those who knew the full story. The woman who had judged someone based on appearances was now herself being judged by everyone who watched her leave. Richard Coleman had locked himself in his office with the company's legal team and major shareholders, desperately trying to formulate a strategy to salvage either the deal or the company. His administrative assistant fielded constant calls from board members, investors, and reporters, her usual composed demeanor cracking under the pressure. The CFO had already begun drafting layoff scenarios, knowing that without the Washington acquisition, drastic cost-cutting measures would be necessary merely to survive another quarter. Across town, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Marcus Washington sat in his corner office at Washington Innovations headquarters, a renovated industrial space that retained its exposed brick and beams while incorporating cutting-edge technology and sustainable design elements. Unlike Pinnacle's traditional corporate environment, Washington's offices reflected his company's values: open, transparent, and innovative. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, serving as a reminder of how far he had come from his humble beginnings. Marcus was reviewing quarterly projections, having already directed his team to explore alternative acquisition targets. The Pinnacle setback was unfortunate, but hardly catastrophic for his thriving enterprise. Washington Innovations had cash reserves and market position that afforded it the luxury of patience. Marcus had learned long ago that walking away from a bad deal was often the best business decision, even if it meant temporary disappointment. His assistant, Darius Thompson, entered after a brief knock. At 32, Darius had been with Marcus for 7 years, rising from an entry-level position to become one of his most trusted team members. Dressed in a sharp charcoal suit that complemented his athletic build, Darius carried himself with the confident efficiency that made him invaluable to Marcus. The Pinnacle Partners Board has called 4 times in the last hour asking for another meeting, Darius reported, his expression concerned as he handed Marcus a stack of message slips. Coleman is practically begging for a reconsideration. They're offering to fire Karen immediately and implement any diversity training program you recommend. He paused before adding, they've also indicated they're willing to accept a 15% reduction in the acquisition price as a good faith adjustment. Marcus took the messages but didn't immediately look at them. Instead, he gazed out at the city, the afternoon sun casting long shadows between the buildings. His reflection in the window showed a man deep in thought, weighing not just the business implications but the human ones as well. They still don't get it, do they? Marcus finally said, turning back to Darius. This isn't about one receptionist, and it's not something a hasty diversity training session can fix. You can't solve a cultural problem with a weekend workshop and a few terminations. He stood up and walked to a wall displaying framed photos of Washington Innovation's milestone moments. The garage where it all started, the first office, the IPO celebration, community service events, and teams of diverse employees collaborating on projects. Companies show their true values in these small interactions, the ones they don't think matter or don't think anyone important is watching. Marcus continued. If that's how they operate when they don't know who I am, I can't trust them as partners or as part of our corporate family. He turned back to Darius with sudden resolve. However, contact our HR department. When Pinnacle inevitably lays people off or shuts down completely, I want to interview their engineering team. There's good talent there that deserves a better workplace. Darius nodded, making notes on his tablet. Already ahead of you. Their lead software architect reached out confidentially about 20 minutes ago. Apparently, word has spread internally about what happened, and their best people are polishing their resumes as we speak. Marcus wasn't surprised. In the tech industry, news traveled fast, especially bad news. Set up a discreet recruitment event at the Grand Hotel Conference Center next week. Don't explicitly target Pinnacle employees, but make sure the event is well publicized in channels their team would notice. There's one more thing, Darius added, his expression suggesting he'd saved the most interesting news for last. 3 major clients who were using both Pinnacle and Washington services have called to inquire about moving all their business to us. Apparently, they don't want to be associated with whatever's happening at Pinnacle. The story's gotten out, Marcus, and it's not just about a rude receptionist anymore. People are talking about it as a moment of corporate accountability. This information gave Marcus pause. He hadn't intended for his decision to become a public statement, but he wasn't entirely unhappy that it had. Perhaps there was a larger purpose being served. Let our client relations team know these inquiries might be coming in. Handle them professionally. No gloating or disparaging Pinnacle. We stand on our own merits. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his office earlier than usual. He'd spent a restless night replaying the events at Pinnacle and second-guessing his decision, not from a business perspective, but from a human one. Had he been too harsh? Should he have given them another chance? The uncertainty wasn't about the rightness of his position, but about the impact on innocent employees who might lose their jobs because of leadership failures. As he settled into his desk, his executive assistant, Maya Chen, brought him the morning financial news summary along with his coffee. The headline made his stomach tighten. Tech firm in freefall after discrimination incident scuttles acquisition. The article detailed how Pinnacle's stock had continued to drop in overseas trading and quoted anonymous sources describing the lobby confrontation, albeit with dramatic embellishments that made Marcus wince. It's everywhere, Maya said quietly. Social media, industry blogs, mainstream business news. People are calling it a watershed moment for corporate culture in tech. She hesitated before adding, "You're being hailed as a champion for standing up against discrimination. But Pinnacle is being absolutely savaged." Marcus sighed deeply. "That wasn't my intention. Call our PR team. I want to release a brief statement emphasizing that this was a business decision based on cultural compatibility concerns. No specifics about the incident, no accusations. The last thing I want is to be perceived as trying to destroy another company for publicity." Over the next week, the situation at Pinnacle Partners deteriorated rapidly. Major clients began withdrawing their business, citing concerns about the company's stability. Investors called for Richard Coleman's resignation, blaming his leadership for the cultural issues that had cost them the acquisition. By the 10th day, Pinnacle's board announced an emergency restructuring plan that included significant layoffs and the immediate departure of 3 top executives, including Coleman. 2 weeks after the fateful meeting, Pinnacle Partners officially announced it was filing for bankruptcy protection and laying off 70% of its workforce. The company that had once been poised to become part of Washington Innovation's growing portfolio was now fighting for survival, its reputation in tatters and its future uncertain. In the midst of this corporate collapse, Marcus approved the hiring of 23 former Pinnacle engineers, including 2 who had previously filed discrimination complaints against their former employer. These new team members were welcomed into Washington Innovations with the same orientation program all employees received, one that emphasized not just technical excellence, but also the company's core values of respect, integrity, and inclusion. Among these new hires was Victor Ramirez, the former head of product development, who had spoken up in that final boardroom meeting. During his interview with Marcus, Victor had confessed his long-standing discomfort with Pinnacle's culture, but his reluctance to leave the projects he had helped build. "I should have done more to change things from within," Victor admitted. "But it's hard when the problems are so deeply ingrained, and when speaking up might cost you your career." Marcus had nodded in understanding. Change rarely comes from within when the leadership isn't committed to it. Sometimes the most powerful statement is walking away and taking your talents somewhere they'll be fully valued. He extended his hand to Victor, and sometimes that's exactly where the best new beginnings come from. As the dust settled on the Pinnacle Partners collapse, the business world continued to debate whether Marcus Washington's decision had been a principled stand or an overreaction. But within Washington Innovations, the message was clear: how you treat people matters, regardless of who you think they are or what you believe they can do for you. It was a lesson learned at tremendous cost to some, but one that would resonate throughout the industry for years to come. 6 months after the Pinnacle Partners incident, Washington Innovations headquarters buzzed with anticipation as employees gathered in the expansive atrium for the company's annual all-hands meeting. The space had been transformed for the occasion. Rows of chairs arranged in a semicircle faced a sleek podium bearing the company's logo, while digital screens displayed real-time comments and questions from remote employees joining from satellite offices across the country. Natural light poured through the skylights above, illuminating the diverse crowd of nearly 500 employees who represented every department, level, and background within the organization. Among them sat the 23 former Pinnacle employees, now fully integrated into the Washington team. Although they no longer stood out as newcomers, their presence represented something significant about the company's values and Marcus Washington's leadership style. While Pinnacle Partners had ultimately been acquired by a competitor for pennies on the dollar after emerging from bankruptcy reorganization, its most talented team members had found a new home at Washington Innovations, bringing with them valuable expertise and a profound appreciation for a healthy corporate culture. Marcus Washington stepped onto the stage to enthusiastic applause, his tailored charcoal suit complemented by a tie in the company's signature blue. At 45, he carried himself with the confident poise of someone who had built something substantial from nothing. The journey from a garage startup to a multi-billion-dollar enterprise had not been without challenges, but today Marcus appeared energized rather than worn by the weight of leadership. He adjusted the microphone before addressing the assembled employees, his deep voice carrying throughout the atrium without needing to raise it. "Today marks our 15th annual all-hands meeting," Marcus began, glancing around at the faces before him. "Each year, I'm amazed at how we've grown, not just in numbers or market capitalization, but in our impact on the industry and on each other's lives." He paused, allowing his words to settle. "Growth brings challenges. As we've expanded to over 2,000 employees worldwide, maintaining the culture that defines us becomes both more difficult and more essential." Marcus clicked a remote in his hand, and the screens behind him shifted to display the company's quarterly results, impressive figures that exceeded analyst expectations and showed continued growth across all business segments. The audience murmured appreciatively at the numbers, but Marcus quickly moved past them. "These results matter," he acknowledged, "but they're not why we're here today. Financial success is a byproduct of something more fundamental: our commitment to our core values and to each other." With another click, the screens changed to display 4 words: innovation, excellence, integrity, and respect. "Today, we're announcing our new customer service training initiative," Marcus explained, his expression serious as he surveyed the room. "Every person who enters our buildings, calls our lines, or contacts us online deserves respect, whether they're a job applicant, a delivery person, or a CEO. Because you never know whose interaction with your company might be the one that determines your future. The screen shifted again to show details of the program. A comprehensive approach that would involve every employee, regardless of role or seniority. Unlike traditional customer service training that focused only on front-facing staff, this initiative recognized that everyone in the organization represented the company in some capacity. What made the program especially unique was its emphasis on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias in daily interactions. This isn't just about being polite or professional, Marcus continued. It's about creating a genuinely inclusive environment where everyone is valued and heard. The research is clear. Companies that excel at this outperform their competitors on every meaningful metric. But beyond the business case, it's simply the right thing to do. As Marcus detailed the specifics of the initiative, many employees nodded in understanding. Though the Pinnacle incident had never been officially discussed company-wide, rumors had circulated. Most understood that something significant had occurred during the abandoned acquisition, something that had reinforced Marcus's commitment to building an exceptional culture. After the presentation concluded and the crowd dispersed to afternoon breakout sessions, Marcus made his way through the atrium, stopping to chat with employees and answer questions. As he approached the refreshment area, he noticed Elena Diaz, one of the former Pinnacle engineers who had joined Washington Innovations after the bankruptcy. At 34, Elena had quickly established herself as an invaluable member of the product development team, bringing innovative ideas and exceptional coding skills to her new role. "Mr. Washington," Elena said, approaching him with a cup of coffee in hand. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've been wanting to speak with you for months." Her voice was steady, but carried an emotional undercurrent. "I heard about what happened that day at Pinnacle's reception desk." She lowered her voice slightly, though the surrounding conversations provided ample privacy. "For years, we tried to change that culture from within, but leadership wouldn't listen. Small incidents would happen, comments in meetings, overlooked promotions, disparaging remarks, and they were always dismissed as oversensitivity or isolated cases." Marcus listened attentively, giving her his full attention despite the bustle around them. He had learned early in his career that truly hearing people was among the most powerful leadership tools available. "When the acquisition fell through, many of us were initially terrified about losing our jobs," Elena continued. "But there was also this sense of, I don't know, vindication. Someone with real power had finally seen what we'd been experiencing and said it wasn't acceptable." She shook her head slightly. "Thank you for standing on principle, even though it would have been easier and more profitable to look the other way." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, considering her words. "The easiest path is rarely the right one, Ms. Diaz. And what seems profitable in the short term often costs you more in the long run." He gestured around at the thriving companies surrounding them. "Would you believe our stock is up 30% since we hired your team? The innovations you've brought to our cloud security platform have positioned us years ahead of competitors." Elena smiled with genuine pride. "It's amazing what people can accomplish when they don't have to waste energy navigating a toxic environment." "Exactly," Marcus agreed. "Standing up for respect doesn't just feel good, it's good business. Talent goes where it's valued, and innovation thrives where people feel safe to contribute their best ideas." As Marcus made his way back to his office after the event, he passed the Washington Innovations reception desk, where a diverse team greeted visitors with genuine warmth. Jamie, the lead receptionist, was explaining the company's visitor check-in process to a potential client with patient thoroughness. Marcus nodded in greeting as he passed, receiving a friendly smile in return. Behind the reception area, mounted on the wall in elegant brushed metal lettering, were the company's core values: innovation, excellence, integrity, and respect. They weren't just corporate buzzwords or marketing materials, they were principles that had built an empire and, ultimately, shut down a company that had forgotten their importance. In his office, Marcus found a small package waiting on his desk with a note from his executive assistant. "This arrived today. Thought you might want to open it personally." Inside was a framed article from Businessweek titled "The Washington Way: How One CEO's Stand Against Discrimination Transformed an Industry." The article detailed how in the 6 months since the Pinnacle incident, over a dozen major tech companies had revamped their diversity and inclusion programs, citing Washington innovations as a model. Marcus placed the frame on his bookshelf rather than hanging it prominently. He had never sought recognition for that decision. It had simply been the only choice he could live with. As he settled at his desk to review the next quarter's strategy, his phone buzzed with a message from Darius. Coleman just announced his retirement from the industry. Thought you'd want to know. Marcus didn't reply immediately. Instead, he looked out at the city skyline, thinking about how single moments could define careers and companies. Richard Coleman had built Pinnacle Partners into what was once a respected firm, but he would forever be remembered for its spectacular collapse. A collapse triggered by a receptionist's prejudice that reflected a deeper cultural failure. Standing and walking to the window, Marcus reflected on his own legacy. Washington Innovations wasn't perfect. No company was, but they worked every day to build something that matched their stated values. In the tech industry's endless pursuit of innovation and growth, they had remembered something fundamental. How you treat people matters, from the most powerful CEO to the newest intern. It was a lesson learned at tremendous cost to some, but one that would resonate throughout the industry for years to come. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows between the city's buildings, Marcus returned to his work with renewed purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new moments to live up to the values that define not just his company, but himself.